Então, pessoal, boa noite, super obrigada pela presença. Esse é o primeiro webinário nosso com a Kathy, que é uma super parceira da Alma Mater, trabalha com a gente como tutora de SAT, ACT e outras provas desde 2014, e lidera o braço Alma Mater Test Prep da Alma Mater. O foco de hoje é para falar sobre o SAT, principalmente como um preparo aí para a prova de agosto, do final da semana que vem, mas como a gente acabou de falar, vai ser útil para qualquer um de vocês em qualquer momento que vocês forem fazer a prova. Só uma ordem operacional aqui do webinar. A gente vai lançar um poll, uma enquete, vou lançar esse minuto, e a gente gostaria que vocês, deve ter aparecido aí na tela de vocês, a gente gostaria que vocês respondessem, se possível, para a Kathy ter essa informação enquanto ela faz a fala dela, tá? Estou vendo que vocês já estão respondendo, obrigada. E com relação a perguntas, vai ter espaço para muitas perguntas. O que a gente sugere é que vocês escrevam as perguntas na caixinha de Q&A, de texto, ao longo da fala dela, ou levantem a mão naquele reactions, e aí depois a gente vai abrir microfone, bater papo, responder dúvida, tudo isso. Tá? Então, agradeço todo mundo aí pela participação, and thank you very much, Kathy, also for your time and your availability to help so many Brazilian students out with this.
Of course. Well, thank you for the introduction. I could understand some of it.
Oh, good.
Wouldn't say a lot, but Kathy was something I could understand. 2014, I understood. So I am Kathy Wasik. As Gabriella said, I've been working with Alma Mater launching. I was there for the launch of Alma Mater Test Prep back in 2014. I am sort of the lead tutor at Alma Mater Test Prep. I'm also the tutor coordinator. So I'm the person you come to look for a tutor who might help you with SAT, ACT, IB, AP, whatever you need. We have a tutor for just about everything. So I'm here if you need me. But today we're going to focus on the SAT, particularly the August SAT, but everything we're saying will apply to all digital SAT administrations. So I have been tutoring the SAT for almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years next year. So I've actually seen, this is now the fourth SAT administration I've seen, the fourth iteration of this test. So I've seen it go through all the changes. There are certain through lines that we're seeing. And this test, in a lot of ways, has the same material as the paper-based SAT, if that's one you've seen, but the format is different. So to give you a sense of the format, I'll just share this. So the test is significantly shorter than it was previously. It's also significantly shorter than the ACT is now. So that's a consideration if you're debating the two tests. So the test has a reading and writing section and a math section. Now, within the reading and writing section, there are two modules, each of which is 32 minutes. So the first module is going to be a mixture of questions, a mixture of difficulty levels. It's also going to be a mixture of reading questions and then what they call writing questions. So those are essentially grammar questions. And within the reading, it's a variety of different passages, a variety of different formats. You'll even see some tables and graphs aligned with text, and you have to answer questions pertaining to those two things to sort of synthesize those two elements. So the first module of the reading and writing and the first module of the math are a mixture of difficulty levels, and those are going to determine what your second module looks like. So there's a first section that's a mixture of difficulty levels. The second section, if you do really well in the first section, is going to be more difficult than the first section. So within the reading and writing, if you do really well on module 1, you're going to get a harder second module. Same thing with the math. The difficulty with that is that the timing is the same regardless. So that's something we have to budget for. So on the reading and writing, you still have just about a little over a minute per question, regardless of whether you're on the difficult track or the difficult track or the easy track for the second module. Same thing with the math. You've got a little more time per question, but you've only got about 1.5 minutes per question, even if you're on the more difficult module for that second module. So that's sort of the basic outline. I know it sounds nice. Couldn't I get on the easy track? And that sounds like it would be easier. The thing with getting on the easy track for the second module is that then your maximum possible score is going to be lower. So to really get your best possible score, you want to get on that hard track. And the kind of score you want is going to depend on the kind of school you're applying to. So that's something that if you have questions about that we at Alma Mater can help you figure out what score do I need? And that kind of determines, well, how many questions do I need to get right to get that score? So with that, thank you for answering the poll. It looks like we've got a lot of people who've already taken the SAT before, about half who are taking the August test. Again, this is going to apply for whatever test you're going to take, whether it be August, October, and beyond. And it looks like more people had issues with the math, although we've got some of both. So I've prepared actually a reading question as well as a math question, just to kind of familiarize ourselves with some of the techniques we might use, to familiarize ourselves with some of the tools available on the digital test. If you have any questions as we go, feel free to reach out. Let me have my Q&A open so I know that you're asking questions. So many windows. Okay, so let me go ahead and share that.
And just to say, if people want to send questions through in Portuguese, you can, because that is part of what I am here to help do. Tá? Então, podem mandar as perguntas em português, fiquem super à vontade, que eu traduzo e a Kathy responde e eu ajudo a traduzir a resposta. Okay.
Thank you for that. So let me rearrange myself here. Whoops. Okay. So if we take a look, before we even worry about this individual question, we've got the timer going up here. We would have started with 32 minutes, but I've had my timer going here for a bit. So on the reading and writing, we're looking for the best answer. We're not looking for the correct answer. So that's a key thing to keep in mind. So when you're looking for the best answer, it's like if I'm choosing among doors 1, 2, and 3, I see a car before, behind door 1. I don't want to just say, oh, I love door 1. I love a car. I'm going to pick a car, because what if there's a plane behind door 2? So we want to really use process of elimination when we're looking for the best answer. So that's the number one thing to think about for the reading and writing. With that, we actually have this fun little tool on the new digital test that actually allows us to eliminate choices. So there's this, can everyone see this ABC with a slash through it up here that I'm clicking on? So if I click that, that allows me to eliminate choices. Just like so. Or, oh, I didn't mean to eliminate that one. I'll undo it. And once I click on that for one question, I would recommend doing that at the very beginning of the reading and writing. Once I click on that, I can do that for every single question. I don't have to keep clicking this. It'll be set up for me on all subsequent questions. I see a question here. Okay, yes, so that's a great question. What is this site? So if we go to the College Board website, so if you go to collegeboard.org, you'll find on there practice materials. So if you can click on, there's a menu for SAT, you'll find digital SAT prep materials, and then what you can do is download this Blue Book application. It's an easy download. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And then there are 4 practice tests. So these are adaptive practice tests. There are 4 digital SAT tests, and there's 1 PSAT, or actually 2 PSATs. So there's sort of a younger PSAT and an older one. For those of you who don't know what the PSAT is, that's sort of, it's comparable to the regular SAT. It's just a test, though, that in the US is administered to students who are sophomores or juniors, just to get them acclimated to the test. So we basically have 5 good tests there. So with that, we can, with this Blue Book app, we can take practice tests to figure stuff out, and to get a sense of the test. I see other questions coming in. Bear with me a moment. So with this question, just to kind of give us an overview, we talked about process of elimination. The other thing I recommend is answering questions in your own words first. So you want to read through the question first, actually, then read through the text and answer the question in your own words before eliminating. So what we would want to do here is go ahead and read through the question. So which choice best describes the function of the second sentence in the overall structure of the text, excuse me, talking about tests so much. So why doesn't everyone just take a moment to read through that text? I'll give everyone, we got the timer there. I'll give everyone a minute and then we'll think about it. Okay, so any thoughts? Anyone want to chime in as to we're going to think of our own answer here. And I'm losing. Does anyone have? So you can raise your hand, respond in the Q&A. Any thoughts on what might be happening here, what the function of that sentence might be? No thoughts. Everyone
feeling shy.
I completely understand that. If I were you, I wouldn't answer either. So what we can think about is the context here. So this is a totally tough question. They're getting into some science jargon that's intimidating. We want to ignore all the stuff we don't get. So, we don't have to worry about Betelgeuse or Beetlejuice or whatever its name is. We don't have to worry about consuming all the helium. What we want to do is get the gist of what's happening. So if I read through it, if I look at that first sentence, I see astronomers are confident. So there's something that they're confident about, and I can understand that. We know what confidence is, right? The second sentence says they are much less confident, however. However, right there is indicating a shift then from the previous sentence, right? Third sentence, we learn about this astrophysicist and her colleagues. So they investigated blah, 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 right? But concluded that this method could not sufficiently reveal Betelgeuse's internal characteristics. So we've got the first sentence, astronomers are confident about something. Second sentence, they're not feeling as confident, right? And third sentence, this astrophysicist and her team looked at something, but they couldn't figure it out. So one thing I might think about is, I'm not sure how all these things are strung together. They're asking me about the function of the second sentence. I can think about, well, what if it weren't in there? What if I didn't have that sentence in there? So then I would jump from astronomers are confident to, well, this astrophysicist and her team have no idea what's going on. They tried a method and it didn't work out. So I would have to think there needs to be some kind of transition in there that introduces me to the idea that Serafina and her team are not confident, or they weren't able to figure something out. So with that general broad idea, let's see what we can cross off here. So we've got our tool set up. So which choice best describes the function of the second sentence? Okay, so it explains how the work of Nance and colleagues was received by others in the field. We didn't learn about anyone else, right? We just know about her and her team. We'll get rid of that one. It presents the central finding reported by Nance and colleagues. Well, did they find anything? This one is tempting because we know they're researching something, but they didn't actually find anything. That was sort of the problem. Their method didn't work. We can get rid of that. It identifies the problem that Nance and colleagues attempted to solve, but did not. Perhaps, oh, you see, I'm running out of time here. They do warn you. So, and that's good. They're telling me to move on. So this one, though, seems pretty reasonable, right? Because we said the astronomers were confident, but now they're not so confident. That seems to line up with a not so confident idea. And then it describes a serious limitation of the method used by Nance and colleagues. That one's a little tempting. So a serious limitation of the method they used. Well, if we look at what it says, so she and her colleagues recently investigated whether acoustic waves, blah, 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 could be used to determine internal stellar states, but concluded that this method could not sufficiently reveal its internal characteristics. Well, it is sort of telling us that the method didn't quite work, but we're not actually learning a limitation to that method. What we're learning is that they weren't able to figure out this big question. So what we want to do is, as we're narrowing down, we're kind of comparing the choices and seeing, well, what's different between these? And we want to be really hungry to find what's wrong with answers rather than what's right. Because it's, as sad as it may be, it's easier to find what's wrong with things than to find what's right. So in order to find the best answer, we have to find what's wrong with 3 out of the 4. So I'm going to cross off D, C is my answer, and I click next. So that's that for that section. Let me address some of the questions here. So biggest struggle in the math section for Brazilian students. That's a good question also to specify Brazilian students, because I do see a variety of challenges that are more particular to Brazilian students than to American students, just by virtue of the education you're getting in Brazil versus in the US, what the educational systems focus on. So I find that factoring quadratics, to be really specific, is something that needs a lot more practice for Brazilian students. You focus a lot on the quadratic formula, or Bhaskara, as you guys call it. So that seems to be like the method for figuring out the roots of a quadratic. It's a good method. We need it for some of the questions, but we also need to know how to factor. That's one thing. Other challenges specifically, I would say that's the biggest challenge. What I find also, it depends on the school that a student is coming from, but some schools are a little too calculator heavy. So students kind of don't know actually how to do the questions. They know how to do it all on the calculator. And the SAT is pretty good at asking questions that require a better, bigger conceptual understanding of the material. So that is something that I find myself working on with students. What I would say is that the nice thing about this test is that the number of topics is quite limited. So we know exactly what they're going to test you on. So I can give you exactly what you need to do well on those questions, and give you a bunch of drills so that you know, so every time you see this kind of question, you know, I'm going to do this. So that's my question on the math. Manuela, hello. Is it a good idea to do 2 tests and vote? Okay, good question. So it depends on where you're starting. And that's also a little bit of question, I think, for Gabriella and others who can definitely help you depending on where you're applying, and like, do you submit all tests? And, you know, everybody's super scores is my understanding, but Gabriella could speak more.
I can, yeah.
More specifically as to what schools really do that for real. So, and for those of you who don't know, so the SAT can be super scored, which means, let's say I do really well on the math on one test, and I do really well on the reading and writing on another. You can actually submit both of those tests, and schools will look at your top math score across the 2 tests and your top reading and writing score across the 2 tests. So, so that's, you know, that's something to consider. I think what we tend to do is, let's say you have, it depends on your timeline. So if you have a lot of time before a test, we're going to work on both sections probably. And depending on what your weaker section is, we're going to spend more time on that section probably. But if it's, you know, you might be applying to a program where the math score matters a lot more than the reading and writing. So we're going to focus more on that. But yeah, once that first SAT score comes back, if you knocked it out of the park on one of the 2 sections, we're going to forget about that section generally and just focus on the other section leading up to a subsequent test.
Yeah, I don't know, Kathy, I don't know if you want me to just speak to that.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think you basically said everything I would say. So just to reinforce Manuela and others, I would never recommend kind of starting your SAT prep thinking of doing math well first, and then doing reading, writing well in the next test, or vice versa. It is very much about getting your first SAT score, having prepared either equally for both sides of the test, or kind of proportionally to your skills and your abilities. And then after that first official test score comes through, as Kathy said, sometimes you've completely nailed the math, and then all you need to focus on is reading, writing. But yeah, that's very much where the kind of the SAT tutoring meets the testing strategy, and kind of in a way where where Alma Mater Test Prep meets Alma Mater Consultancy. Yeah.
Right. So I hope that answers that. And then, are there other materials? Yes. So also on the College Board website, you're going to find these non-adaptive digital tests. So what that means is these are going to be in the same format as the tests that we were just looking at, except that they're paper-based. So they're not going to be adaptive. However, that's great practice material. So that's also available on the College Board website. If you're working independently, of course, if you can work with a tutor, that's going to be the best way to do your best. But if you're working independently, what I would say is, let's say you're going through questions you missed on the math, and you realize, okay, I'm really missing a lot of quadratic questions. And that might be, I need to work on factoring, as I said earlier. Khan Academy is a great free resource for targeted practice. So you can go there and you can look up, look in their whole SAT prep zone. They've got practice quadratic questions for the SAT. They also have more sort of academic questions for practice. There are lots of books out there also. I know that the Princeton Review just released practice digital tests. There are other things online you can find. So the digital materials are new because it's a new test, but everything is kind of slowly coming out. If you work with a tutor is going to give you really specific homework to work on using a variety of materials. And then how can you maximize the use of the calculator? So that's a good question. We're running a little short on time, so I might just show you. Let me pull up a question, a math question, so that we can actually see how the calculator works. Bear with me one moment. But yes, so let me show you the calculator here. So what I would say is, for those of you with your own calculator, and I would advise having a calculator. So some students often ask me, well, I don't have a calculator. What kind of calculator should I get? So if you do not already use a graphing calculator, I would not purchase a graphing calculator. Reason being that a graphing calculator is super confusing to use if you've never used one before. If you have all the time in the world before your test, and that is not the case if you're taking the August test, sure, maybe you can figure out how to use it, but you're better off getting a scientific calculator, which is a more basic calculator. It doesn't graph, but it has sine, cosine, and tan on it. So if you look up scientific calculator on Amazon, you'll find lots of them. So I would do that. And then for any graphing that I need to do, I can actually just go to the calculator that they provide on the digital test. And for any of you who have used Desmos, this is a Desmos calculator. So, what you do basically is just type in what you're, if it'll let me, type in what you want to graph. I'm just putting in a random thing. And yes, so then it gives me my graph here. If I had a question where they were asking for the minimum, I can just click right there and it shows me there's my X coordinate and my Y coordinate. So the graphing function is really smooth on the SAT. The reason I recommend having your own calculator is that it's a little cumbersome for anyone who's used, your phone or your computer calculator, to punch in on the screen what you're trying to find is not ideal. So if you have something with buttons, that's just going to be faster. So again, any graphing function, we can use the calculator. Again, that calculator tool to show you is up here in the top right corner. So that's, do we have another question? No. Yes. Okay, so that, Katerina, that's a good question, I would say, for Gabriella. And that also really, she would say, really depends on a lot of factors. We know a general score would be, when I started, it was over 1,400. It's become more like 1,500 now.
1,500, yeah, 1,500 minimum is what I would say.
Right. So, but, I've had students who've gotten a 1,450 and they get into Penn or whatever. And so, of course, Gabrielle is the sort of the expert on your profile and what that means for what scores you need.
And I think we have one more question that's just come in.
Sure. So, this right here. Yeah. So this is a helpful thing, just for jumping to questions. So I can just jump to, for example, question 4 like that. And then I can go to the review page. So there's this thing flagged. You see this red flag for review. So let's say I'd gone to question 4 and I wasn't really sure about that one and I wanted to return to it later. I go up here to mark for review. I click that. So I'm clicking this mark for review. And then when I go to review page, I've got a little flag there. So if at the end of the section, there were some that I skipped and I wanted to go back and see just, can I figure it out now? I can just immediately click on question 4 and go back to it. So it's the same, we used to say on the paper-based test, circle questions and return to them. So it's that same idea. And this is just a shortcut here. Yellow, black, and blue above this tool. I think that's just a design thing. That's a good question. I don't think that's anything special. If you find something that's useful for, let me know. But I think that's just College Board design. Any other questions?
So now is your time, everyone. Any final question, final shot? Maybe not.
Great. So, well, it was great meeting all of you in your little boxes. And if you have any other questions, I'm here. And Gabriella's here, and we're happy to help. Not to speak for Gabriella, but I'm sure she's happy to help.
I don't know, of course. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. For those of you taking the test at the end of next week, right? End of next week, very good luck. And Beata is going to add into the chat box here of our Zoom our email address, our WhatsApp contact, because if any of you want to follow up with Kathy or with us on test prep, on testing strategy, on college counseling, on any other questions that you weren't able to answer, then we are really, really happy to help you out. Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining. But especially thank you, Kathy, so much for your time and for the great insight.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for attending and for your great questions.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. Obrigada. Boa noite. Have a lovely evening.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.